lecture about morality and the question when it is justified to blame or praise someone. And I will tie this in with a discussion about insanity, notably that by Susan Wolf. So I want to prepare you that it's not about Foucauldian insanity or anything like that. So don't expect that. To start off, I want to inspect a statement with you tonight, and that's the statement, "I couldn't help it." The question is, when do we say such a thing? Or if you feel that "I couldn't help it" is usually just a bad excuse to get ourselves off the hook, maybe we could better look at "she couldn't help it." I want to wonder what the kind of person is we say such a thing about. Of course, we could say it in different ways. We might say, "She couldn't help it, she's a bit crazy, she's not really in control of herself and that's why she did it." Or we might say, "She couldn't help it, it was the circumstances, something happened that made it impossible for her to avoid doing what she did." I expect that most people have the intuition that statements 3 and 4 are in very relevant ways different from each other. On the first phase, they both seem to be an answer to the question, how come she did it? Why did she shamelessly yell at you like that, for example? So say somebody yelled at you and you want to know why did she do that. Then we might say, well, she's crazy, she has some kind of psychiatric disease. I don't know exactly what, but I do know she went to the doctor the other day. Or we might say, it was the circumstances. Maybe her mother just died and she was not completely herself and that's why she was more likely to snap, and we will say, okay, that's understandable, it was the circumstances. Or we might say that maybe somebody told her that you just broke her favorite cup and that she really believed it. And then you say, why did you do that? And then we might also think, well, it was the circumstances. She thought you did it, even if maybe you didn't do it. But it was the circumstances that made you believe it. Well, what I want to argue first is that this picture is incorrect. I want to argue that the circumstances are not just one of the possible explanations of why somebody did something, but that I want to defend that it is always the circumstances, no matter which other explanations, like she's crazy, might also apply. So next to things that we are used to seeing as circumstances, like, for example, another example, if somebody stood behind you, pulled a gun, and you yelled at somebody that happened to stand in between you guys, then maybe you think, okay, well, that's understandable as well, that was a circumstance, or to break the cup was a circumstance, or the mother died, that was a circumstance. But I want to say that there's more things that are circumstances. I want to say that being crazy is a circumstance as well. Yes, even simply being an angry person is a circumstance. Now you may think, why? Is it not true that if we say it like that, we can never hold anyone responsible for anything ever again? Maybe you think this would be the biggest bad excuse ever to never have any moral ambition ever again. Chances are there are some people thinking here that maybe are not so willing to accept my argument, so that's why I hope you'll bear with me, because this was only step 1. Because the question, of course, is, what do we understand to be a circumstance? Do we only understand it to describe things that are the case outside of a person at a certain moment in time, like when somebody pulls a gun? We would say that it doesn't really matter in that case what the character is of the person who yelled. Most people would yell if somebody all of a sudden drew a gun. So the fact that this particular person yelled does not depend on her character, and if we want to get angry, we should get angry not at the person who yelled at me, but the person who drew the gun. So yes, that person drawing a gun is a circumstance of the other person yelling. But I believe we should understand the category of circumstances to be broader than that. In the gun example, we are talking about one specific moment in time. We are not interested in the character of the person who yells because we just concluded that that was not relevant. Everyone would yell in such a case. But that's different in the case of craziness. If we say that craziness is a circumstance, it's not in the sense that we should include inner mental states into the category of circumstances, because after all, circumstance is something that happens outside of you and around you. But if we include craziness into the category of circumstances, it is because of circumstances that obtained in the past and that influenced the person in such a way that she became crazy. So then we might say that craziness itself is not necessarily a circumstance, but it is the necessary result of all the circumstances in the past. And we can do that kind of reasoning not just for craziness, but also for simply being an angry person. So now let's take Jessie. Jessie is the kind of person who looks happy at one moment, but can then suddenly snap at you like that. Jessie falls in our category of simply angry people, the kind of persons who get aggressive when they drink. And now let's say that Jessie yelled at me, loud. If we take only the circumstances of the present moment into account, there seems to be no other option than simply to condemn Jessie for treating me so unfairly, because after all, I didn't do anything, of course. However, the question that arises is, why would Jessie yell at me? For that, we have to go back in time. We have to try to find out what led Jessie to become such an unreasonably angry person. Now, you may question, why do we have to find out about that? Why can't we just say, I don't care why you did it, it is simply wrong to yell at me and I won't have it, so shame on you, Jessie. I say we cannot say that, because it would be inconsistent. Why would we excuse someone for yelling or for pulling the gun, for yelling when somebody pulls a gun, or when the mother just died, or when somebody else is at fault? And maybe even if somebody is crazy, but not if somebody is simply an angry person. Why are we in that case no longer interested in the explanation of someone's behavior? Why are we not interested anymore if somebody behaves like that very often? Do we think that Jessie behaves like this on purpose, whereas the person who lost her mother, let's call her Brenda, yells by accident? Do we think that Jessie can choose how to behave, while Brenda is more the passive victim of the situation? I say that this distinction between angry on purpose and passive victim of the situation does not exist, or at least not in the way that it seems to be presented like that here. No one ever chooses to do anything out of nowhere. We cannot point to a certain moment in time and say, ha, that's where it happened, that's where Jessie decided to be an angry person. In other words, there's no such thing as metaphysical choice. And by that I mean that something would be a metaphysical choice if it was from a completely free will, in the sense that it was not part of the chain of cause and effect. If we see Jessie as purposefully choosing to yell at people, and are not interested in any explanation as to why Jessie would do that, then we seem to think that Jessie made such a metaphysical choice, and one that was spontaneous. But I think that that's not possible. I claim we can never make choices that are spontaneous in that sense, because everything is a result of the whole chain of cause and effect. So then the first conclusion is, I am a determinist. Everything is part of that chain of cause and effect, and therefore everything we end up doing is the result of everything that came before. And that's great, I think, because it means that if we try, we can always, other things being equal, find out an explanation for why something happened. And if we can, I think it would at least be fair to Jessie to explain why Jessie ended up as such an angry person, seeing as I truly love fairness, so let's try to do that. Here we have Jessie and Jessie as a baby. And we're now going to sketch her life's history. Let's say Jessie was neglected by the parents, got a big attention deficit disorder, started bullying in school, teachers punished Jessie a lot, parents award more punishments, Jessie has no faith in grown-ups, starts to distrust people more and more, has no faith in the world, ends up as an angry person with a hardwiredly distrustful, bitter and angry brain. Even though Jessie tries to be kind, have fun and be cheerful, it just doesn't seem to work, at least not always. Okay, and I want to make one important point about this, because this is not an empirical point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to just save Jessie's face. I'm not trying to say if we come up with this kind of history, then we might say that it was all a result of cause and effect. What I want to say is a general and conceptual point that this is always and necessarily the case. There is always a lifelong chain that precedes your current character, which explains how you came to be this way. And note that if that were not the case, then the only other option would be that you were born with the kind of character that makes you behave the way you do. And if we are interested in people having control over what they do, then I think being born with it is hardly less likely to make us happy. So if control is what we care about, then we have to conclude that an important part of your character is outside of your control. Some people end up angry, some cheerful, some end up very capable of controlling their moods and other people don't. The way your personality is constituted starts with and can only possibly start with the things you get from other people. That is simply the human condition. Even if you can work on your character and try to amend it and maybe add new features to it, the person who does that is always the result of a process that was very much and very importantly beyond the control of that person. So the degree to which you succeed in changing or amending or correcting your own character will also depend on the whole chain of cause and effect that came before you and over which you have no control. Okay, so far I have been agreeing with the philosopher Susan Wolf, who argues that no one is ultimately, what she calls it, in control of their deepest self. Yet Susan Wolf wants to make sense of moral responsibility. Even if we cannot control the kind of character we start our adult life out with, maybe we can still justify holding each other morally responsible, and that's the project I will continue this talk with. Wolf thinks it's possible, and I think so too. But Wolf argues that you can only hold someone morally responsible if they have a sane deep self. So there's sanity. Only if you end up with the same character can we see you as a morally responsible person. Given the fact that we just concluded that your character is in very important ways outside of your control, we should now also admit that whether you end up as a sane or an insane person is likewise the result of this chain of cause and effect. Okay, so now let's turn to the question, what does it mean to be sane or insane? Wolf uses an example to illustrate what she means, and her example is called Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo is a sadistic dictator, and Yo-Yo has been raised by a father who is also a sadistic dictator. And this father has gone to great lengths to make sure that Yo-Yo was completely brainwashed into thinking that torture is just fine, and that if your citizens are disobedient, then the perfectly fine thing to do is just to torture them and to make sure that you get them back in line. So after the father came down from the throne and Yo-Yo succeeded him, he simply continued the torture. Now, Wolf thinks that Yo-Yo is insane, because he holds a very wrong set of ideas about good and bad and is incapable of correcting them. He cannot see the world for what it is, Wolf says, because he does not see that what he does is bad. He believes that torturing is all right. Wolf thinks we will all agree, though, that torturing is disgusting, and more so that we will think that somebody who does that is insane. I think this has some intuitive appeal. I can imagine that we look at that person, that's a dictator like that, and we screw up our faces and go like, oh my god, this is really insane. So I think that with that intuitive appeal, we may, make a little bit sense of that outside of that theoretical scope I'm sketching here. Other people who do see that torturing is wrong and who therefore don't torture are sane, because they see the world for what it is, namely the kind of world in which torturing is simply not okay. So that is what sanity means for Wolf. It means to have correct beliefs about right and wrong, to see the world for what it is, to be able to reflect on yourself and to correct yourself in accordance with your reflection. I agree with Susan Wolf. Oh, moved it should have been there, but anyway. I agree with her to quite a large extent, but I want to make a little change to it, to the way she sketched it. Because I think it makes little sense to include having correct beliefs into the conditions for sanity. Not because I think that we could not say anything about which beliefs are correct and which are wrong, because I agree that we should say torturing is bad, but because I think that everyone is fallible. Everyone is fallible. You can do your very best and try very honestly to obtain a good set of moral beliefs, but maybe you will make a reasoning mistake at some point, and I think it would be implausible to say that that reduces your sanity, because, because you tried and maybe you made a mistake, but that does not necessarily make you insane, I think. What I agree on with Wolf, however, is that it reduces your sanity if you are incapable of reflecting on your beliefs and correcting them, or likewise to reflect on your behavior that should be in accordance with these beliefs, and to correct those if they are not in accordance. If we look at sanity in that way, we see that it's no longer a matter of all or nothing. It's not like you are either a lunatic that should be kept in a mental hospital or a normal person that decides for herself, but sanity comes by degrees. There's no fundamental difference between the lunatic and the habitual moral offender. It's only a difference in degree. In the end, we're all a mix of what we were born with and the character that was nurtured into that material. For some, the result is fortunate, for others, less so. In practice, that means that in some cases you will be able to correct yourself, and in other cases you will not. And again, I think this has some intuitive appeal, because I suppose we all experience that sometimes we're in control of ourselves, while in other cases we just cannot help doing something. And I think those cases, according to this theory then, show that we are not completely sane. So that was step 2 of the argument, sanity comes by degrees. And now the final step can be made, and that is a question: if we accept this picture of determinism and sanity, can we still hold someone morally responsible? The answer, and I have to keep that quite brief for now, could be elaborated on, but I cannot do that here, it's a shame, is yes, we can. To the extent that someone is capable of reflection, correcting and endorsing her moral beliefs and behavior, we can keep her morally responsible. That's a compatibilist approach because it combines determinism with the possibility of moral responsibility. But not metaphysical moral responsibility, not because she acted right or wrong spontaneously, but because we respect her as a moral agent and acknowledge that after all the relations of cause and effect that preceded the present moment, she has ended up with the capacity to reflect on herself and correct herself if necessary. Alright, to wrap it up, let's get back to Jessie. Is Jessie sane? Well, maybe to some extent. Jessie is capable of reflection. Jessie tries to be kinder and less angry, and this lines up with the criterion of being able to reflect on your own beliefs and to correct them in accordance with your reflection. It also lines up with the criterion of reflecting on your behavior. But what compromises Jessie's sanity is the fact that Jessie does not succeed in acting in accordance with the result of that reflection. So unfortunately, we will have to conclude that Jessie is under the influence of her life's history and is not completely sane. Thank you.